Okay, so today we're going to be looking back at our CSPs across the advertising unit. So we obviously started with Unseen, then we looked at Galaxy, Represent and Omo. And one of the things that we need to think about is why specifically each one of those is chosen. And I think a big part of that and the choice in terms of the advertising case studies is to do with context. By studying these three very different adverts that go across time, we get a sense of the shifts, the conventions, the trends of advertising more generally. And it means it exposes you to a range of different manipulative, persuasive strategies and allows you to kind of engage with different potential audiences and responses. So we know that in this particular unit we're going to be looking at things across time, and that might be something that you're asked to do in your exam, is to consider an advert within its individual time period or consider the range of time periods that the advertising case studies are part of. So on the slide here I've got a range of words, some of which I've been applying to the case studies after we've gone, some of which you'll know, and others which I just think are kind of referenced really, really clearly when we're looking at something like context. So in English, when you've got an essay, you use phrases like contextually speaking to place a literature text like Macbeth that you're studying now, for instance, in the Jacobean period. In media, we do exactly the same thing. So, for instance, I'm looking up here at the word traditional and I'm thinking, right, that links immediately to Omo, the 1950s context. I'm looking at subversive and I'm thinking represent in terms of the 2016 context. So what I would like you to do is to start using these really specific words and phrases. I'm going to repeat them as much as I can to identify and define the differences between these case studies. So I've broadly put these into a group of lists. If I move this here, you can see the whole thing. So we've got 1950s, the words that I would use to describe that time period. We've got the word hegemonic, which we've repeated a few times. You guys are starting to use that really confidently. Traditional. Didactic, which means intended to teach. So media texts originally were quite two-way aspects of communication. Sorry, one-way aspects of communication. I've got an idea, I'm going to give it to you and you just take it, learn it and believe it. Whereas now we have a much more fluid and multi-leveled way of interpreting media text. So didactic texts tend to be older when people were less able or less used to responding back and feeding back. Regulated, heavily regulated, rigid, limited, but also developing. We have to acknowledge that things were always changing. Then in the middle I've got the 1960s. I've got two of our CSPs, Tony Blackburn and BBC Doctor Who, both of which were in the 1960s. So we know that that was a time of real change. And then at the end there we have the 2000s, so words that we would use to describe our newest CSPs like NHS Represent, stimulating, innovative, varied, subversive, diverse. Okay, so we can use these particular phrases to talk about how things have changed over time. Now, there's a phrase that is used in the GCSE specification, and that's this one here, the media as a window on the world. And it comes from a guy called David Buckingham, who stated that the media doesn't just offer us a window of the world, they offer us versions of reality. So as we look at a media text, we have to understand the messages and the meaning that is being conveyed, but we also have to deconstruct that to think about the context that it's mirroring and or subverting. How does it fit into the time period? How does it fit into the ideology or the culture or the society and the values of the time? And that's quite an interesting concept. That's where you get your high level answers as well, by considering things like that.